He was 28 years old. He had no university degree, no license to trade, and a desk on the far side of the world. And in the space of 3 years, from a small office in Singapore, he lost £827 million, and destroyed a bank that had survived for 233 years. A bank that had financed wars, bought a third of the United States, and kept the money of the Queen of England. The name of the bank was Barings. The name of the trader was Nick Leeson. This is the story of how a single man, doing a job nobody above him understood, quietly turned the oldest merchant bank in London into a pile of debt, and how everyone whose job was to stop him looked the other way, right up until the morning there was nothing left to save. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what Barings was. Founded in 1762, it was not a bank of ordinary people. It was the bank of empires. When Britain fought Napoleon, Barings helped raise the money. When the United States wanted to double its size, it was Barings that financed the Louisiana Purchase, $15 million, and with it, a third of a continent. It grew so powerful that a French statesman once said there were 6 great powers in Europe: England, France, Russia, Austria, Prussia, and the House of Baring. Kings borrowed from it. Governments trusted it. For 2 centuries its name was a synonym for money itself: solid, discreet, permanent. Even the Queen of England kept an account there. A promissory note from Barings was as good as gold in any port on earth. This is one of them, a letter of credit that could be turned into cash from London to Shanghai. That was the whole business: trust, built slowly, over generations. It was the last thing you would expect a 20-something in a trading jacket to be able to burn to the ground. And yet, Nicholas Leeson was born in 1967 in Watford, north of London, a plasterer's son from a council estate. No Oxford, no Cambridge, none of the polish that filled the boardrooms of the city. He left school with modest grades and took a back-office job: settlements, the unglamorous plumbing of banking, checking that trades other people made actually added up. He was good at it. Meticulous. And he was ambitious in a way the men above him badly underestimated. By 1992, Barings had spotted a young man who seemed to fix problems, and it sent him to the other side of the planet, to Singapore, to help run a small new outpost trading futures on the Asian markets. He was 25. And here Barings made the mistake that would kill it. In Singapore, Nick Leeson was put in charge of the trading floor, and of the office that was supposed to check the trading floor. He ran the casino and he counted the chips. On the floor of the Singapore Exchange, Leeson quickly became a phenomenon. In a loud trading jacket, arms flailing in the hand signals of the open outcry pit, he grew into one of the biggest single players in the entire market. Some days his orders alone made up a striking share of everything that traded. To the traders around him he looked unstoppable, a young Englishman who seemed to win, and win, and win. London saw the very same thing on paper. Neither the pit nor the head office could see what was quietly building underneath. His job, on paper, was almost boring. It was called arbitrage. The same contract, a bet on the Japanese stock market, the Nikkei, traded in 2 places at once, in Osaka, and in Singapore. Sometimes, for a few seconds, the price was slightly different in the 2 cities. Leeson's team was supposed to buy in the cheap city, sell in the expensive one, and pocket the tiny difference. Low risk, low reward. Thousands of times a day. Done properly, it is one of the safest games in finance, because you are never really betting on which way the market goes, you are only pocketing the gap. London loved it. The profits from Singapore flowed in, clean and steady, and Leeson was hailed as a star, the golden boy of the Far East, the man who printed money out of thin air. There was only one problem. Almost none of it was real. The rot began with something small, and human. One of Leeson's junior staff made a mistake on the floor, sold when she should have bought, a loss of £20,000. In a well-run bank you report it, you swallow it, you move on. Leeson did something else. He opened a special account to hide it, an error account, a place to bury small mistakes until they could be fixed. Its number would become infamous. Account 88888. In Chinese numerology, 8 is the luckiest number there is. This account would become the unluckiest in the history of banking. Because once Leeson had a place to hide one loss, he had a place to hide all of them. And a trader who never has to admit a mistake is a trader who has stopped being careful. The losses in 88,888 did not get fixed. They grew. So he started to trade his way out. Every time the account sank deeper, Leeson made a bigger bet to try to win it all back. And to fund those bets, he needed cash, so he lied. He told London the trades were for clients who did not exist. He invented profits on paper and reported them upstairs, where they were applauded. He even forged documents to satisfy the auditors. On the screens, he was Barings' brightest star. Inside account 88888, he was drowning. And London kept the taps open. Head office wired him hundreds of millions of pounds to keep his positions funded, believing it was funding a goldmine, never once sending anyone independent to ask the obvious question: profit this large, this fast, this certain, where is it actually coming from? The man who was supposed to check Nick Leeson's trades was Nick Leeson. And no one in London wanted to interrupt a winning streak. By late 1994, the hole in account 88888 had grown past £200 million, and still no one in London knew it existed. To dig his way out, Leeson made his most dangerous move yet. He began selling something called a straddle, in plain terms, a huge bet that the Japanese stock market would stay calm. Stay flat, and he collected a fortune in fees. Move sharply in either direction, and the losses were almost bottomless. It was a bet that the future would be boring. For a while, it was. The Nikkei drifted sideways, and the premiums rolled in, and Leeson used them to service the monster in 88888. He had, in effect, bet the entire bank on the single most fragile assumption in the world, that nothing dramatic would happen. That no earthquake, political, financial, or literal, would shake Japan. On the 17th of January, 1995, the earth moved. Literally. At 5:46 in the morning, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake tore through the Japanese city of Kobe. More than 6,000 people died. It was one of the worst disasters in modern Japanese history, and, on the trading screens, it was the one thing Nick Leeson could not survive. The market he had bet would stay calm went into free fall. Every point the Nikkei dropped, account 88,888 bled faster. A rational trader, staring at that loss, cuts and runs, takes the wound and walks away with the bank still standing. Leeson did the opposite. He decided he would fight the earthquake. In the days after Kobe, he began buying Nikkei futures on a colossal scale, trying, almost single-handedly, to shove the entire Japanese stock market back up by force of will, so that his bet would come good. Think about the size of that. One man, in one office, buying billions of pounds of contracts, trying to lift a national economy off the floor to hide a loss no one knew about. For a few days the market steadied, and perhaps he believed he could do it. Then it fell again. And now every extra bet he had made to save himself was another blade turned inward. The faster he bought, the faster he sank. By February 1995, the numbers had left the realm of the survivable. The losses hidden in account 88888 had passed £600 million and were climbing by the day toward £827 million, more than the entire capital of the bank. Barings, the 600-year-old, the 230-year-old institution, was worth less than the debts of one man in Singapore. It just didn't know it yet. The end came in a single, frantic week. On the Monday, Leeson's hidden positions were the largest they had ever been, and bleeding with every tick of the market. By midweek the exchanges were demanding more and more cash to cover them, margin calls arriving faster than London could wire the money out. A senior Barings executive flew into Singapore to find his star trader, and found, instead, an empty chair and a set of numbers that made no sense at all. Somewhere in those 48 hours, the men at the very top of the bank finally understood the truth: the profits had never been real, and the losses had no bottom. On the 23rd of February, Nick Leeson walked off the trading floor, checked out of his life, and ran. He and his wife flew out of Singapore, leaving behind, on his desk, a note. 2 words, scrawled and unforgettable: "I'm sorry." Behind him, back in London, the managers finally began to open account 88,888, and could not, at first, believe what they were reading. That weekend, in the Bank of England, the most senior figures in British finance gathered in emergency session to try to save Barings. They searched for a buyer, a rescue, a bailout, anything. But the hole was too deep and the clock had run out. On Sunday, the 26th of February, 1995, Barings was declared insolvent. 233 years of history ended in a single weekend. What happened next was almost an insult. The great house of Baring, banker to kings, the 6th great power of Europe, was sold, in its entirety, to the Dutch bank ING. The price for the whole bank, its name, its offices, its history, its debts, £1. A single coin. It was, people said, the most expensive £1 purchase in history. And the people? 1,200 staff faced losing their jobs. Investors and bondholders who had trusted the safest name in banking watched their money evaporate. Barings had promised its bankers their annual bonuses just days before, around £100 million, and now there was nothing to pay them with. A single trader, chasing a loss he was too frightened to confess, had wiped out an institution older than the United States. Nick Leeson did not get far. He surfaced in Frankfurt, Germany, on the 2nd of March, and was arrested at the airport as he tried to make his way back to Britain. For 9 months he fought extradition, then, in November 1995, he was flown to Singapore to answer for what he had done. There was no long trial. He pleaded guilty. And the sentence was harsh: 6.5 years in Changi prison. Inside, his life fell apart a second time. His marriage collapsed. And then he was diagnosed with colon cancer, given, at one point, a real chance of not walking out at all. He survived both. He was released in 1999, having served a little over 4 years, a free man at 32, famous, broke, and cancer-scarred, the most notorious trader alive. But here is the question that has echoed for 30 years. Was Nick Leeson a criminal mastermind, or a symptom? Because the official inquiry that followed did not only blame him. The Bank of England's report laid the collapse at the door of Barings itself, a bank that let one man run both the trades and the checks on the trades. A bank whose bosses did not understand the business their star was in. A bank so hungry for his profits that it never asked how they were made. Leeson himself has always said a version of the same thing, that he was reckless and wrong, yes, but that at almost any point, anyone doing their job properly could have caught him in an afternoon. No one did. The controls that were supposed to make a 200-year-old bank unbreakable were, in the end, a single overworked man marking his own homework, 8,000 miles from anyone who might have looked. And if you think this was a one-off, a freak of the 1990s that could never happen again, look closer. In 2008, a trader at the French bank Société Générale was found to have hidden nearly €5 billion in losses. In 2011, a trader at UBS lost over $2 billion the same way, unauthorized bets, buried in the back office, discovered too late. Different names, different cities, the same disease, a person who could not admit a loss, inside a system that was not really watching. As for Nick Leeson, the story did not end in a prison cell. From behind bars he wrote a memoir, he called it Rogue Trader, and Hollywood turned it into a film, with a movie star playing him on the screen. He came out of prison, survived the cancer, and reinvented himself, an after-dinner speaker, a commentator, briefly even the chief executive of an Irish football club, paid, in the final irony, to lecture rooms full of businessmen on the dangers of risk. The man who broke the oldest merchant bank in London had become, of all things, a brand. Barings never came back. The name survives only as a brand on other people's doors. The Queen moved her account. And the lesson the whole industry swore to learn, separate the traders from the people who check them, and never, ever stop asking where the profit really comes from, is a lesson that every few years, somewhere, someone forgets all over again. So here is the question I'll leave you with. Nick Leeson lost £827 million and brought down a bank older than most countries. Was he the villain of this story, a gambler who lied until there was nothing left? Or was he simply the one who got caught, in a game that was rotten long before he sat down to play? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know which empire of money collapses next, subscribe, because on this channel, the ledger always comes due.